Welcome to the 3Haunted podcast, where we bring you all things horror, supernatural, folklore, mythology, and all things that go bump in the night.
What's up, everybody? This is your co-host, Ashley Lunar Goddess, Gorilla Girl filmmaker and horror-loving cinephile. I'm just your average podcast-producing badass.
I'm John Thomas. Some would say that I go a little too far with my love of all things horror, paranormal, and meta, but I say, talk nerdy to me, and I'm all yours.
What's up, ghouls, gals, and all of our spiritual tribe out there? In today's episode, we'll be diving into the worlds of clairvoyance, spiritual guideship, as well as the reconnection journey with our special guest author and quantum consciousness coach, Kevin Russell. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
So glad to have you on, and also really glad to have like a fellow horror fan. Anybody that can compare Tim Curry's Pennywise to Bill Skarsgård's, like,
Yes.
we're in good company.
Absolutely.
It's part of the contrast that is available for us to experience. That's what we're here for.
It's all part of the human experience, right?
Yeah.
Scare the pants off of ourselves and enlighten.
Yeah, right. There you go. Sometimes it happens at the same time.
Yes, that's what I try to tell people when they're like, "Why do you watch horror?" I tell them it's cathartic.
Yeah.
There's catharsis in there.
There is. It's pushing the boundary of what we are willing or able to entertain as a concept or as an experience. Some people avoid it like the plague, which is great. Some people are drawn to it like, flies to honey, which is great. And that's the individuated experience that we're here to have. It's, we get to explore and develop what interests us, what scares us, find that edge that is maybe between interest and, I'm not quite sure. And, explore those areas. That's the richness I find. Pushing the boundaries of comfort, pushing the boundaries of what we're willing to let ourselves entertain, think, feel. And then we get the choice of, do we want to continue feeling, thinking, or emoting these things? And that's where we get into kind of the creatorship of life, when we get to that layer of choice.
I love that. And I think I find it's always interesting if I do watch a film and I am scared in that moment, I pause and ask myself, why is that scaring me? What inside of me is connecting with that? Why do I believe that is real? Because oftentimes the horror films that I watch are very much the creature
Right.
or paranormal, supernatural vein of things. And so typically we're taught that's not real, right? But especially zombie films, listeners know, like, zombie films get to me. They really get to me. And so I've asked myself, what is it with that? Why does that bother me so much?
That's that's brilliant to be able to do that in real time, kind of self-actuated inquiry. That's amazing, especially when you're in that heightened experience of a reactive state with a horror movie. That's phenomenal. Have you gotten any answers to those questions when you've asked them?
Some of it, like if I'm watching like a possession film or a haunting film and I'm finding like my stomach is tensing up and I am really anxious, I'll check myself and say, why am I feeling this way? And oftentimes if it's something in that realm, I'm like, man, I must believe that's real. Like that can happen. That's a possibility. That is something that can happen. And not only that can happen, but it can happen to me, for me to feel that fear and anxiety. And zombies, I still have no idea. Because in my waking mind, my conscious mind, I'm like, that's so not real. But it's, and when I watch them, I'm actually not scared.
Okay.
It's when I go to sleep. I have very visceral nightmare dreams. I wake up screaming and I'm like, okay, it got me somewhere.
that hit a little close to home, yeah.
But I still don't know.
Yeah. And I find sometimes it's us working things out. Sometimes it's just us working things out internally. My wife, for years when she was young, would have really graphic nightmares of being chased, being tortured, being pursued, being, kind of like attacked by the mob. And it got to the point where she was pretty like lucid dreaming in the sense that she had autonomy within the dream. So she was like, she'd run away and then she'd shoot an energy ball at the crowd, at the horde, and nothing worked for years. And then finally she got to this place of just kind of being exasperated and exhausted by this whole thing. So she was in a dream, she was being pursued. And this time she did something differently, and she stopped and she turned to this entire horde of like literally pitchforks and torches ready to take her apart. And she said, I have nothing but love for you, in the dream. And it was everything stopped, everybody stopped. And it was the last time she had that dream.
Can I tell you the creepy synchronicity of what you're saying? We just talked about this
I love it.
because I was talking to a previous guest how I can lucid dream and I can dream jump, is what I call it,
Yeah.
because there have been dreams where I'm being pursued. I'm being constantly pursued. And so my answer to that when it happens is I quickly snap into lucid dreaming. This is a dream, and I will force my entire dream to change.
Wow. Yeah.
And if it continues to chase me, I keep changing my dreams.
Yeah.
And the guest actually told me, have you ever just stopped and turned around and said, you don't belong here? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I can do that?
Or what message do you have for me? Yeah.
Yeah. And I never thought of that. Like, I could do that.
Well, especially when we're in it, it's hard to, and this is life, and this is a dream, and this is anything. When we're in it, when we're in a stressful response, it's hard to do anything other than what's already programmed, because we're in this kind of unsteady, tenuous, like unstable place of dis-ease, where we're not in an easeful state, we're in a heightened state. And a lot of times our options kind of like disappear. And that's where, it's like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It gets real simple, real quick. And that can happen in a dream as well. So practicing that autonomy, practicing that awareness in the dream, and then again, recognizing that choice. Like, I don't have to continue being pursued and torn apart or whatever it is, tortured. I can try something different. And it might be the scariest thing I can imagine, which is stopping and just dropping into radical acceptance of the situation and switching from fear to love.
And I love what you said, just this idea that you can turn around and ask, what message do you have for me? Obviously, you want something. What is the message?
And sometimes they're in it, sometimes there's not. And I find that can be a pretty powerful approach of inquiry for our lives as well, where we're feeling something and it's physical. And it's like, okay, I haven't hurt my shoulder, I haven't done anything exercising, but I've got this chronic pain. What is going on? So we can actually drop into a meditative state fairly easily with some breath work, with whole brain synchronization exercises, to create a little bit of space internally so we can actually get an answer when we do some inner inquiry like that. And so these are some of the tools that are naturally available to us, just like clairvoyance, clairaudience, and all the rest of the fun stuff.
What is a brain synchronization exercise?
I'm so glad you asked. All right. So most of the time, most of us are walking around in some low-grade stress response. And it's just a byproduct of life, byproduct of the families we're born into, the ancestral epigenetic information that's passed down that kind of helps us with navigating the world. And when we're in this, the 24-hour news cycle, politics, all these energies that exist outside of us that can be manipulative, they can really kind of take us over if we give into those things. And the way that it gets really easy to give into those things or start getting more solidified in a polarizing belief is because we're off balance pretty much all the time. We're in a low-grade state of stress, so we're never in a brain synced whole brain state. We're always in a dominant hemisphere kind of low-grade reaction. So we're actually never in our right mind or whole mind unless we take action, conscious action, to return us to that place. One of the challenges is that we're pretty much kind of in a single plane of existence for most of our lives. We don't really do dynamic movement that crosses the midline of the body. So when we drive, we're facing forward. When we're eating, we're facing forward. When we're sleeping, we're facing forward. When we're working, most of us at a computer, we're facing forward. When we exercise, we lift weights, we run, we cycle. We're all in this kind of single track. And one of the most powerful things we can do is to actually break the midline of our body, because we are physical, we are also electromagnetic. So all of us right now have two electromagnetic fields extending about 12 to 15 feet up, down, and all around us. The inner electromagnetic field looks like a donut. It's a toroidal shape around the heart. Outer electromagnetic field is closer in resemblance to the Earth's electromagnetic field, where it goes out the pole and in the pole. So out of the crown, in through the root. And these are actually things they teach in Montessori. So these are, if kids can do it, we can do it. So the important thing is crossing the midline of the body. So one exercise is called cross crawls, and it's kind of a seated march. You can do them seated or standing, where you're tapping your left hand to your right thigh, your right hand to your left thigh as you're doing a seated march. And then you add to that, facing forward, eyes only, up into the left upper limit of your vision, and hold your vision there. So it's a little bit like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, where you're giving your system a more challenging task to accomplish. So you do about 25 taps on one side, and then shift your gaze to the other side of the room, upper right corner of your vision. You do about 25 taps there. So that's one example of a brain synchronization exercise. Because when we're in a stressed state, there's a fluid-filled membrane that connects the hemispheres of the brain. It's called the corpus callosum. When we're stressed, that membrane drains, because we're in an autonomic limbic system response. So the blood's rushing back to the core, protect the vital organs. We get into kind of a Terminator scan of, is there any danger? What do I need to be aware of? And if we don't disrupt those patterns, that's the electromagnetic resonance that we stay at. It's like a static, like it's not balanced, it's not harmonious. So if we recognize we're in an imbalance, or we're reactive in thought, in action, in expression, and a reactive thought can be, oh, I'll never be able to do it. Oh, I should have done that. Oh, why can't I get this thing I want? I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy. A lot of the reactions are so normalized because they're so familiar, and we experience them so often, we don't recognize we're in a reaction. We just kind of experience, oh, I tend to be a negative person. It's like, no, that's the conditioning and programming you've experienced. That's not the true you. So I find the more that we can get to a whole brain state, crossing the midline. Another great one is just crossing your legs at your ankles, crossing your hands at your wrists, and just doing some nice relaxed belly breathing for 2 or 3 minutes. And you're going to find kind of the intensity that you're experiencing starts to dissipate, like kind of starts to drain out.
Does it matter if they're crossed like the same direction, or do they need to be opposing directions?
Yeah, great question. When you're starting off, you can just cross whatever is feeling the most comfortable for you.
Just cross them.
Yeah, so just a lot of times I'll guide clients when we're in a process. If it's one of those where we want to explore our own knowing, our own inner knowing, I encourage people to cross your ankles one way, give it a breath, see how it feels. Cross your ankles the other way, give it a breath, see how it feels, and go with the one that just feels like a yeah for that moment. It's just like, ooh, okay, that feels good. And then same thing with your wrists. Cross your wrists one way, check it out. Cross your wrists the other way, and go with whichever one feels the best. Now, if you're in duress, if there's something crazy going on and you're not driving a car, you're not operating heavy machinery, there's something I offer. I call them positive disruptions. And if you guys want to, I can guide you through it real quick.
Let's do it.
It's a little bit of breath work and a whole brain posture. So go ahead and cross your right ankle in front of your left, and your left wrist on top, right ankle in front of left, right wrist on top of left. So right ankle, right wrist on top. So we're going to cycle through the 4 different combinations of the crossings. So I'm really glad you asked about that. And we're going to add breath work to the process. So have either of you heard of Wim Hof as a breath worker?
Mm-mm.
So he's this awesome Dutchman. He created his own breath working method, and he holds a bunch of Guinness records of kind of extreme exposure feats. So he's climbed Mount Everest in shorts and hiking boots.
Oh, wow.
He's ran an ultra marathon in the Sahara Desert without taking any water. He holds breath hold records submerged underwater. They call him the Iceman because he kind of he's one of the forces that popularized cold plunges, ice baths, things like that. And when we can utilize different components, so in this case, we're going to be doing breath work with a whole brain posture. What we're going to do, blow out anything going on in the mind that's ruminating on the past, worrying about the future. Really helps to bring us right into the present moment. As Wim Hof likes to say, we are going to get a little high on our own supply. We're going to hyper oxygenate the system, so you may get a little lightheaded. You may feel a yawn or some tingles in your torso or in the base of the neck. And we're really it's this positive disruption. Like if we have a dog or a pet that's got a bead on something, it's like, and we disrupt it. Hey, look over here. And then the dog looks at us and the tongue comes out and the tail starts wagging. We're going to do that same thing with our body, with our mind body. All right. So left or right ankle, right wrist. And the breath is going to be open mouth. So it's like a push-pull of a breath. So we're going to do 5 of those 4 times, and then we're done. So it's pretty quick.
Okay.
So right ankle, right wrist. I'll guide us through the switches and the crossing. And we'll do 5 of those breaths right now. And go for it. Switch just the wrists, so now left wrist on top. 5 more breaths. Now switch just the ankles. So now we're left wrist, left ankle in front. 5 more. We're halfway there. And then last 5, just the wrists back to the right wrist on top. We're in the home stretch, last 5 here. Let that controlled breath go. Come back to nice and normal breathing rhythm. You may feel a stretch or a yawn that's there for you. So that's one of the options that's available to us. I call it a positive disruption, a bellows breath. And sometimes I call it a break glass in case of emergency breath. Especially with, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but with holidays, with family events, there can be a lot of intensity that increases around those. So let's say you're going to visit family, you're in the car, you're about to go in, everybody's inside, you hear the activity. You're like, okay, here we go. I know my aunt's going to be a certain way. Oh, that one uncle. Oh, my cousins are kind of crazy. If you knock out just 20 of those breaths and do some crossing, you're going to enter into the situation much more balanced, much more present. So you have more of an opportunity to just be real present with everyone. And then if we're feeling a stress response, we're feeling like we're about to shout or blame or yell, that one cousin just knows where to poke us and get those reactions out of us. You know what? I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick, knock out some more breath, knock out some more balancing, and then you come back to the present moment.
That's fantastic. I feel lighter.
Awesome. That's the goal. Invite in more lightness, release some of the weight we've been carrying with us, coming back to more clarity. And then we got more choice in life.
It reminds me a lot of the different yoga practices, especially the ones where you're doing a lot of the crossbody twists.
Yeah.
And because some of them, are opening to the same side, but some do cross. And as you're taking in those deep breaths and exhaling them, that's phenomenal. I love that. Break glass in case of emergency.
There you go. Yep. Knock out some intense breathing, and you're going to come back to your center in short order. Yeah.
Now, how did you first into all of this world? Because it is a unique world.
Yeah. Yeah. Really kind of stumbled into it. I was on a bit of a self-healing journey, we could call it. So my wife and I kind of about 2015, 2016, we'd been married for about 10 years. We had a fourth grade daughter around the time. And we were fighting, we were arguing, our relationship wasn't great, but we weren't admitting it to ourselves. We were just kind of running that usual program of stuff it down, don't talk about it, sweep it under the rug, just carry on, which was just creating more animosity and more resistance and resentment between each other. And so found a couple different modalities, with some very serendipitous, like perfectly placed knowing information helpers coming in at the time. Found a few subconscious change modalities that really worked well for us and hit the ground running. And I came across some research at the time that showed or suggested that about 95 to 98% of our thoughts on any given day, regardless of the volume of thoughts we have, are going to trend towards looping, repetitive, something we've thought a version of in the past. And about 85% of the thoughts we have on any given day are going to trend towards negative. So judgment, comparison, if we're feeling scarcity, we're not feeling peaceful, we're agitated, we're really out of sync. And so if we're in a negative space and we're in a looping space, I'm like, that's the majority of my thoughts. I don't want to listen to any of them. If this is the way my body's trending, I don't want to listen to anything going on. So I learned how to self muscle test, because I was like, a lot of the thoughts in here aren't doing me any good. They're really keeping me stuck, keeping me self-critical, keeping me in judgment and comparison. So I'm just going to test what I'm strong to. I'm not going to make any choices. And so I started muscle testing what shirts to wear in the morning, what to eat for breakfast, what to eat for lunch, what movie to watch if we were going to watch a movie. I was really fascinated by getting really clear, using some of these brain sync exercises and breath work to get balanced, centered, and grounded, and then use these tools to uncover what I was really strongest to, as opposed to what I thought I wanted or needed. And as I was lightening the load with the subconscious work, as I was staying open and curious with my daily inquiry practice with self muscle testing, the noise in my mind started to quiet. The hamster wheel started to slow down. A lot of the physical symptoms I was experiencing, high blood pressure, pre-hypertension, anxiety, stress, depression. I called it bubble gut because it was just digestion, uncomfortableness for, now it's like leaky gut, irritable bowel. I feel like I had all of it. So my constitution is shoring up. My system is starting to regulate. I'm not in as much stress anymore. And then it's interesting, for about a year and a half before I had a massive experience in 2019 of reconnection, I would have a random song in my head every morning when I woke up. Everything from like 1930s blues, bluegrass, jazz, to like 2000s pop music, which I really never listened to. And then we would joke about it. Like, hey, guess what? My wife and I, guess over coffee, guess what I woke up with in my head today? Like 50s bandstand stuff, just a wild spread. I have a massive reconnection experience on the Thursday before Thanksgiving in 2019. And the voice in my head changed. And I didn't recognize this until after I had this experience, that not everybody has a narrator. Like if you're reading something, I'm reading it in my mind and I'm kind of hearing it as I'm reading it, so to speak. And I didn't realize that everybody had that. So I was just assuming like this could happen for everybody. But anyway, the voice in my head changed. And what I heard in practically my own voice was, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you made it. We're going to have so much fun together."
Oh, wow.
I'm like, okay, that's new and interesting. I heard that. That was practically my voice, but it was almost like hearing a long lost twin or somebody I always knew was there, but didn't quite have a perception of it.
Mhm.
And then the next day was the worst hangover I ever had. I call it an energy hangover, just because there was so much just reconnection, reconciliation, and shifted in such a short amount of time. I was all out of sorts. And my wife came home, and she's in an intuitive space as well, so she gets hits, and she says, "You need to take an Epsom soak, an Epsom salt bath." And I knew about the benefits of magnesium. I knew Epsom salt is really beneficial to the system in a lot of different ways. But I was in this like for weird resistance. I was like, I haven't taken a bath since I was 5. I take showers. I'm a guy. What are you talking about? And then she's like, get your ass in the tub. I'm like, okay, get in the tub. I felt like E.T. at the end of the movie where I like came back to life. I was like, whoa, there we are. Okay, that's what I felt. And then ever since then, it was just kind of an organic development of getting knowings, getting seeings, working with clients that were experiencing pain or fear or suicidal thoughts, or really just like under very heavy loads of duress. And I'm with the processes and practices we use, I'm able to connect with a client's energy system and get information from them, which is kind of a switch. Like a lot of people come and are like, oh, you have the answer. I want your help. I'm like, I don't have the answers. You have all the answers. Your body, everything, all the answers are there. I can help you uncover those answers and move through the resistance, let go of some beliefs that aren't serving us anymore, release the trauma that's kind of influencing our decision making in life, so we can get more back to that clarity that's available for all of us. So I've got a lot of different kind of colloquial stories I can share about the hits I've gotten and interesting things if you'd like. But those are kind of the broad strokes of my journey to all this.
So when you talk about that reconnection moment where you just reconnected in, when we say reconnection, do you mean the reconnection to your truest self then, or what is the reconnection to?
That was my interpretation of it. That's the way it felt. So the session, it was a no talk, no touch session with an energy practitioner. And I'd been doing a lot. I mean, it was about 3 years of just pretty much daily, at least weekly work, whether it's catching a way I'm feeling in the middle of the day. And then there's something called the emotion code. If anyone wants to gain greater autonomy in life, greater understanding of the forces that are kind of controlling things, if you learn how to self muscle test and you read the emotion code book and learn the emotion code chart and how to use it, you can do a lot of this on your own. And that was really me. I was just kind of on my own, taking one step at a time, lightening emotional loads from the past, from ancestral stuff I'd gotten, even getting a lot of past life stuff. And as I'm reducing this energetic load, just getting lighter, moving through fear. And in the session, I was just the way I describe it is I felt like a toddler in a dark room where I could feel the furniture there. I could kind of sense things, but I couldn't quite make the details out. And so I was going in, I was like, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm open. I'm curious. I want to know what's going on. And the reconnection, it's like a supernova went off in my head is the best way I can describe it. And I was on a massage table with a blanket on me, and I had a weighted eye mask and a blackout mask, like for sleep, on. So my eyes were open. In the mask, it was pitch black. So I got my eyes closed, and she's doing her thing. I can hear her moving around me, but I'm not, she's doing her own thing. And all of a sudden, it was like in my mind's eye, like curtains parted, and I was shown really familiar, comfortable, happy scenes. So I've always been attracted to the Pacific Northwest, kind of those deciduous rainforests. And so there was a slow moving shot with all the ferns on the ground and that kind of breathing green type of atmosphere in these forests. I've surfed almost my whole life. So then it was a low flying drone shot over surf. And then I kind of got in the vision, I got dropped below water. I've always been really comfortable in water. So I'm just underwater, just checking things out. And then I get shown this vision of me playing soccer with a friend from like early childhood in the house I lived in when I was probably early elementary school. And so I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is fun. And then everything kind of fades, and then the supernova goes off. And the best way I can describe it is just like mainlining unconditional love. So like at the end of Scarface, instead of Tony Montana burying his face in Coke and then lighting everybody up with the machine gun, it was like if that mountain of Coke was unconditional love. And it was just, I was cry laughing because it was too much energy for my body to hold on to. So I come out of it, I get the voice change, and I explained to the practitioner what had happened, and she's getting her own information. So what she said was, well, you just reconnected with your higher self. And it's like you were in a high-rise elevator going from the 3rd to the 5th floor, but your guy in the 9th floor is like, hey buddy, up here, this is where the action is. And that's where the name for my book came, My Guy on the 9th Floor. And it's really just a metaphor. And every one of us has a guy on the 9th floor. Every one of us has a universal concierge, or that aspect of ourself that has always been there, but we might not have been connected to because we're so busy having this 3-dimensional human life. But every single one of us has it, whether we call it my guy, Winnie the Pooh, Cleopatra, Queen of Sheba, Joan of Arc, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a council. It really depends on our beliefs that kind of guide how the expression is for us, is what I've found. So that I kind of just look at it as higher self, like my guy, like, hey, inner me, super conscious, source, spirit, God. It's really whatever our interpretation of that energy, of that essence is. And it's really hyper individual. So it's whatever our beliefs are, that's really what we get reflected when we kind of start stepping into these spaces of inquiry, of exploration.
So, is that the moment that you're referring to when you speak to radical enlightenment?
So radical enlightenment, it was a radical enlightenment experience. It was one of the most intense experiences I've ever had, and one of the most like uplifting, transformational experiences I've ever had. But for me, the radical, it was like a lot of little radical that led up to a big radical. And so a lot of the radicals for me are a lot of change in thought pattern, challenging our thoughts, challenging our beliefs, challenging the way we perceive the world, challenging our perception of good and bad, right and wrong, positive and negative, evil and benevolent, challenging the zero-sum perceptions that a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals are trying to perpetuate and create division from and through, when in reality, any division we experience is artificial. We are deeply connected to each other, to this planet, to the entire universe, from that energetic 0-point energy field, collective consciousness, multidimensional expression that we're all connected to, that imbues everything in life, and that we can really utilize once we get the understandings of how quantum mechanics works, how thermodynamics works and affects the human body. We can really start to get more autonomy and move through these kind of gates and locks that all of us have, with belief, with perception of ourselves and others, with thoughts, with literally the words and the language we use carry energy. And so for me, it was just one step at a time, starting to accumulate different ways of perceiving things that created more peaceful presence and non-attachment in my own life. One was turning off the news. That was a big one. Getting out of the 24-hour news cycle. Because that's just it's like keeping a boot on your head, being pushed into the ground if we're just absorbed in these external things and the things we're being fed, as opposed to not being subjective to it, maybe doing our own exploration if we want to, but then recognizing when we find it, there's a reason behind it. For one, and most of the reasons people do things are because of disconnection, because of scarcity, because of fear, because of the perception of the other. And if the other is wrong because of what my belief is, that means I must be right. Therefore, I must be justified in my actions. But any side to any conflict is going to both sides be thinking that.
Right.
And so this is where it's like, one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, where it's all based on perception and where we are orienting in space-time. And so, challenging our thoughts around people are evil. That's a big one for me. That really was an expansion journey for me, just in a thought exercise of really looking at it as any expression of evil is simply a disconnection from love internally. And sometimes these disconnections are collective. Sometimes we get caught up in this wave of anger or resistance or animosity or fear that's destructive at a large scale. And sometimes it's hyper personal, and it expresses in a family unit scale. And so this is where, with quantum, it's just magnitudes of order. It's as above, so below. It's reflective at scale and at the micro level. So it's really those Satori experiences, those aha moments, those micro enlightenments along the way, and then really challenging our perceptions, our beliefs, our assumptions, and reducing the entanglement that we have with our outer world, the emotional entanglement we have in relationships and with family, the physical entanglement we have with our relationship to our physical body, and our collective entanglement with society and culture and the different movements there. And we have the opportunity to transform our relationship to all of it, to arrive at a place that's better for us, that's more beneficial. And that's, again, it's an individual choice and decision of what that place looks like that I'm trying to get to. But the path and the tools that we use to get there can be really similar, even though our destinations might be a little bit different.
You did mention that you experienced that reconnection in your journey, and then you started receiving, like, knowing and seeing moments. How did that express, like, how did that manifest an expression in your life? What did that look like?
So that was 2019. One of the earliest ones, outside of actually recognizing the song I had in my head, going back to that kind of year and a half lead up, had my experience on a Thursday. Friday was tough. Saturday was great, except I felt a little, it was still reconciling, it was still settling. And I had a song in my head, but now I had more awareness, more perception. So I just inquired. I said, there's a message for me in this song. And it tested strong. And I was like, okay. And I was driving at the time, and I pulled over. I pulled out the emotion code chart. Or actually, no, sorry, not the emotion code chart. I pulled up the lyrics to the song on my phone, and I just kind of like started deducing. It's in this verse. It's in verse 2. It's in the chorus. It's in the outro. I found the line, and the message in the song was, "Let me drive that fucking train." It was a punk rock song. So
I love that. Message is coming through punk rock.
And my dude's hilarious. It's, if anybody's familiar with Transformers, it's a lot like Bumblebee, where it's through pop culture, it's through movie references, or it's through song lyrics. It's pretty entertaining. So I heard "Let me drive that fucking train," and I had my hands on the steering wheel, and I said, "All right, take the wheel." And I felt this like reintegration almost, where it was like, if any, something that we find we can experience, it's called spirit out of body. If people are experiencing an intense situation, sometimes our spirit is like, it can be on a parasail a little bit. It's like, it's intense down here. I'm just going to let a little bit of line out. You deal with this. This is too much earth stuff for me. And so it felt like it was just a whoomp, like a womp back to wholeness, so to speak. And then it was the most effortless drive home. It was like driving on clouds. It was wild. So then January 2020 comes along. At the time, one of our friend groups had a monthly meditation group that met, and news of coronavirus was starting to come out. So this is kind of early 2020. And the friend group asked me, they're like, well, what do you think about that? And the knowing I got at the time was, don't worry about the thing or the virus. It's the people that we need to be worried about. That's the real danger in all of this. And then we come to find, 3 years later, that there's this kind of agenda maybe, or regardless of where we fall on the belief around the virus, the belief around the solution to the virus, companies made a wild amount of money with what's currently going on. And so that knowing, I was just like, no, the virus is a virus, that's okay, but the people behind it, that's the thing to focus on. And so that was a hit I got. Another hit I got was with working with a friend, and it was a really intense situation. She'd been under duress for about 6 months, really experiencing things that she was perceiving as like not her own. And you asked about kind of developing these approaches or these tools. A lot of it has been stumbling into something, still being open and curious to get an understanding of what it is, and then seeing a process or an approach develop after the fact. But the biggest thing for me was just being open, saying yes. Even, I was kind of jumping and building my wings on the way down, where our friend was in a really challenging situation. My wife's background is in psychology, and she has a master's in marriage and family therapy. And the decision was at the time with our friend, the ultimatum was you either come and spend a few days with us and we dive in and we get some work done, or we're going to call a 5150, which is, if anybody's familiar with psychology, it's basically harm to ourselves. So it's an involuntary hold. And she said, all right, I'll come to you guys. And we dove in, and over 2 or 3 days, we probably worked for 8 to 10 hours together. And I'm using at the time my tool set, which was what it was. And we connected, and I felt like there was something like a big bundle of energy that was really impacting her. And I was like, this is, and at the time it was a checklist of inquiry. This is from this life. This is an emotion from this life. No, this is an emotion from something ancestral, from mom or dad or grandparents, something like that. No, this is a past life emotion. No. And then I'm like, okay, well, what else is there? And then I get this knowing or this feeling. And I was like, this is, and I don't even remember if I had this language at the time, but the language I use now is it was a tether, an energetic tether. So the understanding that I've come to in my own practice is when we transition, and I really don't use the word death anymore because I don't find or feel there's anything final to the transition. It's stepping through a door into a different experience. And I do feel like we are a wild, beautiful expression of the theory of Gestalt, where the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if we do entertain the idea that there is something that lives on beyond the physical after we transition, if the transition is anything other than peaceful, it can be sudden, unexpected, prolonged, traumatizing, painful, anything that's less than just a peaceful transition. If we have stuff that we haven't dealt with, if we're carrying baggage, emotional baggage with us, those negative emotions can kind of attach to things that are still in the three-dimensional space. And that's why I call it a tether, where this energy that's transitioned is tethering to, a lot of times it's a friend or a family member. And so I connected with this, and it was just a full body feeling of this is the right direction to go. My wife Kelly calls them truth bumps when you get a full body chill. So I said, this is a tether. And as soon as I hit on that, I saw like a rundown in my mind's eye. I saw like a rundown industrial facility, exposed concrete walls, steel girders, kind of dripping. It was damp. And I was like, okay, I was getting this. And I'm speaking to my friend who's the client at the time. And my friend says, oh my gosh, and she's got her own awarenesses and sensitivities. And she said, every time I've thought about my friend, I see the train tunnels in, I think it was Along Came a Spider, which is like a crime movie with Morgan Freeman and one of the Judds.
Ashley Judd.
And yeah, Ashley Judd, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so I'm like, okay, industrial, drippy subways of New York. Yep, that kind of matches. And I'm just exploring this space that I'm seeing in my mind's eye. And part of the reason our friend was experiencing so much challenge was one of her friends had self-transitioned, had committed suicide in February of that year. And it was February 3rd. And for 6 months, our friend was waking up 3:00 every day with kind of her friend's voice in her head, like shouting for help. And then the 3rd of every month, from February to August, something happened. A friend group imploded, car accident, computer broke, something happened. And so there was this like kind of looping reflection of what the friend had experienced that our friend was now experiencing. And when I connected, I felt like I connected with her friend. And this is what kind of exposed me to this concept of this potential of being a tether.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went to the emotion code, identified what negative or lower emotions were contributing to the tether. I released those. And then the friend changed. And what I was seeing, she was kind of behind some boxes and just really low, like head down. And as soon as we released the tether, she was like a puppy. Her energy was just completely changed. And she's like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it was wild because what I got from her was she didn't regret the action she took. She regretted where she ended up because it was unexpected. She's like, I was expecting to just go back home. And then I was stuck in this like industrial complex. What's going on? So connect with this energy. And then I start speaking to our friend as her friend spoke to her. And our friend's name is we call her Mo. Her name's Maureen. And the friend she was the only person besides her mom that called her Maureen. But she had kind of this like real like jovial kind of bro affect. And so what I was hearing and what I was sharing, I was like, Maureen, bro, what happened, dude? And Maureen starts like tearing up. She's like, she, in my mind's eye, her friend was standing in front of me. I was like, okay, she's about 5'3". She's got short hair, kind of a little, choppy bob type of thing. A lot of energy. She's got kind of green eyes, darker hair. And our friend's like, dude, you're describing her to a T. So that was kind of this first tiptoe into this space. And then I start creating processes based on those experiences. So I was working, so we were able to release the tether and help the friend find her way back home, help her transition.
How did you release the tether? Like how does one do that?
So one is identify. Like it's important to identify what it is. And that has shifted for me. A lot of times when I started out, it was identifying the emotion and the age in which it was created or got stuck, so to speak. And I've evolved that now to be more efficient with it. So I only inquire about an age if it tests strong that we need to. Otherwise, it's just identify the emotion and clear the emotion. And there's a number of ways we can clear emotions just all on our own. I've developed my own physiology has developed its own approach to this. So I do a lot of off gassing. So I yawn, I'll burp, and that's kind of my most efficient method. Because when I'm working with a client, as I mentioned, all of my symptoms started disappearing along my journey. And then after I was feeling really good, really solid, really healthy, the symptoms started coming back in. And I'm like, what? Okay, what now? I'm like, this is from just doing my checklist. This is from this lifetime. No, this is ancestral. No, this is past life. No. And we're out at dinner. I'm like, this is somebody in the restaurant. Yes. And so I'm like, okay, now I'm absorbing energy from people. So I'm like, okay, they're at a table, they're at a booth. And just deduce it down, I'm like, okay, it's the dad at booth 3 over there. All right, go to the bathroom, identify what it is, clear it. Then I started absorbing energy from places. So we were on holiday in Europe, we were in Portugal, and our daughter's kind of sensitive to energy as well. And there's this one town in southern Portugal. We're like, we got to get out of here. Like this is just it feels too intense. I gotta decompress. So one of the easiest ways, and everybody can do this, disrupting or clearing energy. A lot of times the energy is kind of within the system, but when we identify it, it's like the cream rising. When it's identified, we kind of bring that aspect to the forefront. And then we can do this right now. You just we call it swiping, or I call it swiping our electromagnetic field. And so as you're doing this, if you're doing this at home, you may feel some tingles. You may feel some tingles in the crown of your head and your shoulders. So it's simply taking your hand, and you can do this with a refrigerator magnet, but we are electromagnetic as well. So you can just use your hand, and you just hand in front of your nose, but not touching, swipe up and over the crown of your head and kind of flip your hand off the back of the neck like a ducktail or like a mullet. So from the nose up and over the crown, and maybe do 5 or 10 of those. And then just see if you noticed any tingles, any kind of shivers, anything like that. We may or may not have. So that's one way. That's the quickest way you can do it. Other ways to shift energy: rebounding. So jumping jacks, jumping rope, heel drops. That's a way to release energy. Breath work is a great way. We can do qigong tapping or EFT tapping. That's another good way to shift and move energy. Getting outside in nature, barefoot, grounding. That's another really good way. Depending on how much time we have, I mentioned an Epsom soak. I think everybody should be looking at their magnesium levels, just because we're not really getting a lot of the dense nutrients we were getting from our food previously, just because of the farming methods we're using now. And magnesium's present in over 400 biochemical processes in the body. So one, healthy magnesium levels help us with our natural talent, help us with all of this fun stuff we've been talking about. Very practically, magnesium is really important for a lot of physical, biological functions as well. So it's a value add. So there's just some quick ways that we can kind of shift energy, move out of energy, shift out of a negative state that we find ourselves in.
How did you discover your various clair abilities? because I know you went through your radical enlightenment and reconnected to yourself. So you started opening up, and it sounds like absorbing everybody's energy.
That was at least for me, that was part of the journey. Yeah.
I mean, and you said this was about what, 2015 you started this kind of trajectory. So in the grand scheme, it hasn't been that long. All of these things are just opening up for you. Does it get a bit overwhelming?
It has at times. And most of those times were situations where in my mind, I was like, I can do it. I can handle it. And I connected with energy that kicked my ass. Like I got my butt kicked a couple times. But as far as like kind of picking up those tools or reconnecting with those abilities, really just kind of stumbling into it, where like somebody would ask a question about something, and all of a sudden I would know. It would be more like clairessence, where I was like, it was a knowing, like feeling knowing. And then a lot of it just really came one step at a time, kind of working with clients. Another client I was working with was experiencing like fibromyalgia, like nerve ending pain, full body pain, and a lot of emotional weight she was carrying with her, exclusive of what I connected with. But I was just inquiring, feeling into it, and by this time I had some protocol in place. So I was like, I had an understanding of looking if there is a energetic tether, if there are energy cords, if there's negative or traumatized energy that's affecting the system that we can address. And so I get a hit that it's a tether, and then in my mind I just see like beefy, hairy forearms, and I'm like, and then I get like red flannel and lumberjack, and I'm like, okay. And I just start explaining. I'm like, this is what I'm getting. I'm seeing big, beefy forearms. It feels like it's a really big guy, like a lumberjack, and it feels Canadian. And she goes, my husband just passed, I think 2 months ago, after a real quick awareness of, I think it was pancreatic cancer. So it was like 3 weeks from diagnosis to transition for him. And what had happened was he was tethered to her because he was still in the kind of physical human mindset of wanting to be there and provide for his family, wanting to keep his wife safe. The challenge is when we as living humans experience a tether, we experience the negative emotions in the tether as if they're our own. So, and it's especially with the transition time period, there's so much grief and just this upwelling of loss that's taking place. We don't necessarily have the wherewithal of recognizing, oh, this feeling of fear or anger or loss, it might be mine, and it also might be something else that's exacerbating or magnifying the way I'm feeling. So I get this hit about the forearms, lumberjack Canadian. And then the way that my approach to helping energy transition or energy transform is asking, show me a feeling of unconditional love that you've experienced. Because what I found is, it's cliche, but love is the answer to anything. What do I do with a dictator who's terrorizing? Send as much love as we can. What do I do with my mom who's driving me crazy because she keeps nitpicking and she just knows it? Send as much love as we can. So when I asked this energy that I had identified as her husband, like, show me a feeling of unconditional love, I saw Zamboni and ice skating. And so I asked, I was like, was your husband an ice skater? He played hockey his entire life. So we released the energy that was making up the tether. I asked, show me a feeling of unconditional love. And then in my mind, in this kind of creator space, visualization space, I just went for a skate with him. And that's all it took for him to connect with a feeling of unconditional love. And then most times once we connect an energy with that, it's a real quick transition. And it's just back to the oneness, so to speak. But it, like, just like that, it's really been one experience at a time that's just gotten me very comfortable with getting knowings, getting hits, getting downloads, and it just being kind of part of normal life. And I do want to mention, I've kind of flipped my perception of everything in these experiences. And what I've come to an understanding of is we are all already enlightened. We are all already clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. We're all mediums. We can all remote view. Telekinesis, I have a feeling, is right there for us as well. And it really has a lot to do with our beliefs that keep us from these things. It's like, oh, I see, I can't remember the guy, very famous clairvoyant from back in the day, like some name with a G, but it's like, oh, that person can do that, but I can't. But it's these breakthroughs in experience that kind of open up the playing field for all of us, much in the same way as like the 4-minute mile. At a certain point in human history, it was never imagined that a human could run a mile faster than 4 minutes. And then next thing you know, Roger Bannister comes along, breaks the 4-minute mile, and then within 3 years, there are like 8 or 10 other people that broke the 4-minute mile. So it's just breaking through perception of limitation that can throw doors wide open in ways that we never expected.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot. Well, there's something. I want to go back.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you're speaking to of this concept of the tethers, because this idea that we form these strong, energetic, some might call metaphysical connections with other beings while we're in this experience. A lot of people assume once someone passes away, well, it's just gone. And to your point, we're not just dying, we're just transitioning. So it is, it is quite logical to then say, hey, it's possible for those energetic connections to continue for better or for worse. Because if it is a traumatic kind of passing or a very abrupt passing, that might funnel through that tether in that way. And it's interesting. There's a lot, you're giving me a lot to think about, but also this idea that we're already enlightened, everything we have is already within us. And, we're starting to hear that message more and more. Everything you have is exactly inside of you. And for me, I think a lot of it has to do with this idea of divinity or magic. We get trained very young. You're human. You're not more than you are. That's ego. That's blasphemous. That's all of these things. And so we forget, like you said, we are capable. We don't have those limits. The limits are what we believe and what we accept believing. If we believe, well, I'm just human, I can't do any of this, then we're not going to.
That's going to be the reality we experience. Exactly. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are starting to remember their divinity, or whatever you want to call it, your magic, your interconnectedness,
Exactly.
or at least they're feeling that it's missing. They're not
Yeah.
connected. There's that piece of connection missing.
Yeah, that kind of layer of awareness, I think, is really expanding rapidly in a beautiful way. And I think the challenge is that we're exploding and expanding in these awarenesses, but a lot of us are like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? Like, what the heck? And that's really where the book came through, where one of the messages I got in that session in 2019 was, you just reconnected with your higher self and you're here to create a new human design. And I'm like, the first thing I thought as soon as she said that was a book. Understanding and recognizing that a human, something called human-centered design already exists as far as a way to identify an archetype or a personality type. And so in these explorations and identifying things like tethers, and I created I call it a 40-point energy tune-up, which clients have said it's like Reiki on steroids, because it's balancing 10 major energy centers of the body and addressing any emotional components that could be contributing to the symptoms we're experiencing. So it's just been this explosion of tools and approaches that we can take with these heightening levels of awareness, and more of us embarking on this journey back to that natural divinity, back to that spark, that inner magic. And so I had that knowing, that knowledge right after the session. And then between Thanksgiving and Christmas, in 2.5 weeks, I wrote the entire book. And I can't really say that. I co-created, downloaded, channeled. I was writing 16 hours a day. I wasn't tired.
With your guy on the 9th floor.
Yeah, no. And it was a lot of things I'd been interested in and curious about my whole life, that all of a sudden, like, all of the puzzle pieces just fit together. And so it really is a handbook for awakening, a handbook for expanding our consciousness, for reconnecting with that inner knowing, with that higher self, with that inner divinity. And a lot of it are practical things that have been shared for eons. Breathing is really important. If we can all start a breathwork practice, again, let's look, going back to that little kid analogy. Look at a baby or a toddler at the beach. Nobody's sucking in the gut. Nobody's trying to have a beach body. We're running around. We're playing free, big, expansive breaths, kind of barrel chested. No holding, no tension. Getting enough hydration, getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, making sure our food inputs, moving away as much as we can from processed foods, getting back to cooking for ourselves, being more self-sufficient in knowing what works for our own bodies. And that's going to be hyper personal too. And then jumping into those more kind of challenging thought practices, picking up and be exploring subconscious change modalities, because if we're not changing at the subconscious level, we're not really changing because of the power of the subconscious mind body, of the limbic system. So from a processing standpoint, the subconscious, which is operating kind of 95 to 98% of the time of our life, operates at 20 million bits per second. And we're talking like computer bits processing. What do you think the conscious mind processing power is? 40 bits per second. So that's why we're good at a single task. If we're cooking and we're creating a meal and we're just doing that, we can create a masterpiece. If I'm writing, if I'm welding, if I'm creating a plumbing system, if we're present and we're focused, we can do amazing work. We're really not good at multitasking. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you say. It's just pulling us apart. So I come across this information. I'm like, okay, super powerful subconscious that only wants to keep me safe. And it's writing programs based on my life, based on the epigenetic ancestral information that's present. Most, in my experience, there's some past life stuff in there. Again, past life is colloquial because from that quantum standpoint, everything everywhere all at once is happening right now. So it's just helping with perceiving our position in space-time. But the more that we can get into those places, release what's there, come back to that peaceful presence, we start to transform our relationship with the mind body. I call it our earth suit. So the more that we can actually graduate to our pilot's license of the earth suit, the more we come back to that peaceful presence, that divinity, that quote unquote enlightenment that's always been there, because we're starting to excavate those layers of condition, program, trauma, emotion that none of us, I don't care what side of the spectrum of gender we arrive at, if we're more masculine leaning, dust yourself up, brush it off, suck it up. Boys don't cry. If we're on the feminine side of the spectrum, oh my gosh, why does everything have to be such a big deal? You're so emotional. And so we're truncated from our emotional experience from a very early age. To your point, we're really conditioned. And we don't give ourselves the autonomy to hit that pressure release valve. And so the more that we can release the pressure with emotional clearing, with positive disruptions, with breath work, with moving the body, the more we're informing our system, no, you're okay. There's no lion chasing us. There's nothing in this moment. You are okay. And coming back to that and coming back to that, returning to that consistently is what I found. It's kind of the crux of that practice of sifting through and working better with these awarenesses, as opposed to just feeling like the world is imploding. Everything's going crazy. I feel crazy inside and out. I just can't handle this. It's like, no, we've got the tools. We can support each other on this journey and rapidly transform our realities.
Yeah, living in those constant stress states at whatever stage we're at definitely probably served us back in the survival days when we had to make sure there's not a lion chasing us. But we haven't caught up to the fact yet that we don't have to be in that constant state anymore. Now, there is a healthy level of survival we should probably always have, but the extent that it still exists within us is self-sabotaging us at the moment.
Right. It's too much of a good thing. Just like anything, like too much joy, we can get manic. We can get
Mhm.
we can get overexpressive that way. Too much depression, we can get overexpressive that way. Too much fight, flight, freeze, and we're just undermining the integrity of our physiology. So our adrenals get depleted. Our nervous system is frayed. Our immune system gets depleted. And then we get sick and symptomatic. And so, yeah, it's there for a reason. It's a benefit to us. But in our modern society, it's really kind of taken over everything. So if you've ever seen like a nature show, like Sir Richard Attenborough, he's narrated a bunch of them, and you see a gazelle being chased by a cheetah, and then let's say the gazelle gets away, and the camera follows the gazelle back to its herd. You see a gazelle do a massive full body shake, and then go right back to grazing. And that's the thing. That's the only thing we're missing.
Shake it off.
Exactly. We exist in stress, in this undercurrent, this like drip, constant drip of stress, but we never shake it off. We never get out of that resonance. And so if we give ourselves that, it would be great if we were a little bit closer to that biology in a way, because, to your point about hunter gatherer, yeah, we go and we're hunting the mastodon, or we're, defending from the saber-toothed cat, but then the threat leaves. We go back to the campfire. We go back to weaving the basket. We go back to sharpening the tools. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but it's this like, again, everything's connected. And so we're all enmeshed in this competitive, false sense of scarcity, really controlled and contrived existence in kind of society. And the only person that can shift us out of that is ourselves. Nobody else can do that for us.
We're the only ones that can turn around and say, I have nothing but love for you.
Oh, man. Talk about full circle. Heck yeah. I love it.
Full circle.
Yeah. The opportunity is there for sure. And sometimes I say, we have to jump and build our wings on the way down. Do the if we're feeling it, like, I know I want to go after this thing, but it scares the hell out of me. The most amazing thing we can ever do is shake off that fear, shift out of that resonance, and then take one step towards what we want. And then we're going to feel resistance again. So then you shake it off again, complete that process again, take that next step.
Because of looping.
Get out of those loops. Because if we don't change the program isn't going to change by itself, because there's payoff and benefit from that subconscious standpoint.
I am such a nerd. I'm like your guy on the 9th floor. You keep mentioning the jump and build your wings on the way down. And I just keep visualizing Doctor Strange when he jumps off the balcony and throws his cape on, and he's like becoming Doctor Strange as he's jumping, and then he flies off.
That makes sense.
I am such a nerd.
I love it.
But it's such a perfect analogy, because like that journey he goes through, it's the full Ouroboros. It's he's in what he thinks is his, ideal space, goes through a complete evolution and dissolution of everything he believed and thought was real, introduced to an entire new set of experience that he never thought was possible. And in that entire journey, he came back more and more to trusting himself, to believing in himself, and to getting to that place of knowing. And then what happens when a superhero gets that place of awareness, recognition, or knowing? Boom, everything turns on.
Yeah, he's probably my favorite Marvel character because of that.
Yeah.
And that out of a lot of them, I'm going to be a nerd, he and Iron Man are the only ones that don't have some kind of superpower that they were born or bitten with. He had to go, especially Doctor Strange, he had to go through Enlightenment. He had to go through that entire internal journey to reach that divinity that we all are capable of. They're all training for it. They just happen to be working for it.
And I was going to say, as soon as you mentioned that, what I was about to say was the differentiator is their humanity. Mm-hmm. It's their humanness that makes them so powerful, regardless of alternate intervention of, spider, goo, whatever it is.
Radioactive.
Yeah.
All the things. I love his character. And I do love that, like, he keeps his cape figuratively and literally with him at all times, even when he's in his, what did you call it, his Earth suit? He's in his tuxedo and he's just dressed, jumps off, and suddenly he pulls the cape and he's turning into this Iron Man. And really, that's all of us. We've always got it with us. It's just learning to put it on.
That's it. Yeah, remembering how to put it on. Yeah. It'll fit different now. It used to be super super easy to slip into it when we were young. And we just need to get resized for it now as we're growing. But we're just big kids, None of us
We got
know
this.
anything. Yeah,
Right.
we got this. It's funny. My wife and I, when things are getting too intense in life, or it's just like I'm in a reaction or she's in a reaction, if we can catch it before we drop too far in, we just look at each other and say, "You're okay. I'm okay. We're okay. It's okay. We're okay." And sometimes it just takes that little break in the clouds of feeling like, if we're really in a deep place and we're just in this dark place, if we can just get that sliver of light, and maybe it's like I've been stuck on my couch, I don't feel like I can move, go out and sit in the sun for 5 minutes. Just one little step to shift out of that loop that you mentioned creates the beginning of a path to change the entire trajectory of our lives.
Right. And earlier you had mentioned grounding, going outside and, walking barefoot in the
Huge.
grass. I do that a lot. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite way to ground. So, yeah.
It's so, and once you start with once you start to get it more of a practice and it gets more, you use it more and more. John, are you finding that your sensitivity to kind of, let's call it the energy, like you can sense it more the more kind of you use the
Oh, yeah.
practice?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a key. The more we can get awareness and sensitive to our inner energy and feel the shifts, the easier we can direct us to better feeling places internally, as opposed to staying stuck in those places that don't feel good because we don't know what to do or we don't have the tools to kind of make that shift.
Now, for those that want to find your book or find out more about because you make amazing videos about these topics, where can people find out more information about you?
Yeah, if you're looking to get just kind of quick hits, little gems of information, Instagram's a great place. TikTok's a great place. It's at Radical Enlightenment or at Radical_Enlightenment. So if you just kind of start there, you'll find us there. The book you can get on Amazon. And it's also, if you prefer to support your independent bookseller, it's available through the Ingram Spark network as well. So if they don't have it in stock, you can request it at your local bookseller. Let's see, a lot of additional resources at the website, radicalenlightenment.com. A lot of these disruptions that I mentioned and we kind of dipped our toe in, I've got a daily practice of positive disruptions I recommend everybody check out. And that's really going to start to get you back to more regular positive disruption of the body. We've got courses, we've got workshops, we've got a muscle testing course if that resonates with anybody. So yeah, radicalenlightenment.com, Radical Enlightenment on social media. Those are the two best places to find us.
Yeah, I want a supernova in my brain.
Right?
That sounds amazing.
Here's the other rub that I only came to after the experience was I wasn't looking for it. And one of the most powerful places that we can operate is peacefully present, non-attached, and without attachment to a specific outcome, because it limits the possibility of experience. So what I find is if we can have an idea of where we're going, we have an idea of the steps to get there, then the practice is finding the being in the doing. If we can find that state of being, that I am, the isness behind all of the labels and identifiers of life, we've got an idea of where we're going in the positive direction, then we can start making moves there.
Yeah, our suffering is oftentimes linked to our expectation of a specific outcome. And I am
Full body chills.
guilty of
Yeah.
that aspect. So I've been
Me
working
too.
really hard to
Yeah.
breathe out. I have no expectation on this outcome. If whatever happens, happens.
I mean, we want to experience more freedom in the world, more peace in our lives. The best thing we can do is release attachment, resistance, and expectation to others, and to
Yes.
outcomes. Because and this is that kind of funky thing that might be challenging to arrive at, but our reality is created from the inside out. So what we believe, what we feel, what we think, what we speak literally becomes what we experience. So if we're thinking, feeling, and emoting, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, nothing's ever going to change, then that's the reality we're going to experience. If we're experiencing a reality of, hey, there is a lot going on right now, there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of disillusion of past things, there's a lot of new creation coming in, and I'm going to navigate this to the best of my ability and be open to new tools coming in, you're going to have a much more successful time. And it's a practice. That's the biggest thing. This is all a practice. So the lighter we can be on ourselves as we're in these practices, the better off we are.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that is cliche as it sounds that opened up my yoga practice when I started that journey was I took things so seriously at first. Like, I have to get this
Right?
just right. I have to pose.
Yeah.
I don't look like them. I don't.
Yeah.
And the moment, my aha moment during that journey was when I looked at myself in the mirror, kind of wobbling, and I stuck my tongue out and made a face at myself. And then
Yes.
I started laughing because it's like, this isn't about what they look like, what I look. This is, what does it feel like?
Yes.
And if it feels shaky and it feels
Yeah.
wobbly, that's okay. That's part of the journey. And so now, whenever I do any kind of yoga practice, I will take a moment to stick my tongue out and make a face at myself so I don't take myself too seriously.
I love it. Everybody listening, heed Ashley's advice. Oh my goodness. That's such an important factor of lightening up on the seriousness. And there's a great line from, I think it's the something Marigold Hotel, is a movie from a while ago.
Mhm.
And the line is, everything will be all right in the end. And if everything is not all right, it's not yet the end. And so it's like, hey, even in the darkest times, we can laugh. We can add levity to the heaviness, especially when, we're in that comparison and judgment space in a group class like that. Oh my gosh, I'm going to do that from now on, because that's
just look in the mirror and make a face at yourself.
Because what as you were sharing that, what I thought was, in my mind, what I like to do if I fall out of a pose, or if I'm trying something new and it's challenging and I'm not getting it immediately, and I think I might have picked this up from Andrew Huberman. He says, "Good." Like,
Good.
oh, I failed at something. Good. I fell out of pose. Good, because it's not that big a deal, and we get to try again.
I'm gonna start doing that. Yay! Good.
Yeah.
I love that.
I messed up on something. I forgot something. Good. Now I'm going to be able to remember it more in the future. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
I love it. Yeah. It's just, again, it's that asynchronous disruption where it's not the reaction we'd expect. So it can be that much more kind of like tactile, much more impactful. It's like, wait, good. Whoa.
Exactly.
Does not compute. Like, okay, hold on, break
Right.
that down. What do you mean good? It's like, oh, now we got more awareness. Now we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Good. Now we learn. Now we get back in. It's what you do
Exactly.
with it. I appreciate you coming on to this episode, Kevin. You have been amazing, and I hope we can get you on again. If
I'd
you're
love that.
available
This
in
has
the
been a
future.
pleasure.
Yeah,
It'd
you've
be
been
fantastic. Both you
awesome.
guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. No, and right back at you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, John Thomas, you want to bring us home?
I will bring us home. Thank you again, Kevin, for everything. It's been amazing. And yes, thank you to all of our listeners to listen for English. What are words? Holy
Good.
cow. Good. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. All right. Thank you to all of our listeners for listening to this episode of 300 Podcast with your host. I'm John Thomas.
I am Ashley Lunar Goddess.
And if you have any questions, comments, or episode suggestions, please feel free to email us at 300podcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media. You don't want to miss amazing guests like Mr. Kevin here.
Until next time.